Okay, so I want to thank my friends here at Ermatinger Old Stone House, National Historic Site, for inviting me to come and share a little bit about my culture. My name is Elizabeth Minowa, Nanoshkas, Indigenous, Jajakto Dem, Boating Dada, Kumakong Donjaba. I am Elizabeth. I'm also known as, in my Ojibwe culture, Hummingbird. And I'm really thankful to come from the beautiful culture that I come from. I'm Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi, come from the Crane clan, and really welcome the opportunity for the purposes of education, sharing some information about who we are as Anishinaabe people, and in particular here around the Great Lakes region. I am an oldest of 11, blended family, very fortunate to come from parents who very strong in terms of our belief system around who we are, making sure that it's a part of our everyday life. And from ever since I can remember, even the very, are those really memories, kind of thoughts of when I was a little baby, and the ceremonies that we would have gone through as a family to welcome children, to celebrate children, to move us through into young adulthood, to celebrate young womanhood, young manhood, and then certainly moving into adulthood and celebrating the move into adulthood. And how do we do that as Anishinaabe people? The other step of rites of passage that I'm actually just getting ready to enter is moving into grandparenthood. And that happens with the birth of your first grandchild. I'm very fortunate to share that the birth of my first grandchild is coming. So the traditional family life cycle, as I've come to understand, is one that's beautiful, that's celebrated, certainly not without challenge or troubles or issues. But as I've come to understand in my family and the community that I come from, even though I wasn't raised in my community of Okumakong, I definitely was always brought home and connected to our people, connected to the land. And one of the things that was always present was the importance of the celebration of family, the resilience of family, that no matter what you go through, you as a child chose the family that you were born into. And so sticking it out with that family, doing what you can to get through the different triumphs and tribulations of life were really important. So I would actually like to go through that traditional family life cycle and share with you some of the things that we went through in my family. Really important to acknowledge that there are a number of different teachings out there, and what I'm sharing with you today are the teachings that were given to me, my family, and the way that we were brought up, raised in this contemporary world. As I mentioned, the oldest of 11 children in a blended family. So that means I remember when it wasn't so cool to be Anishinaabe or Indian. It was in our living room that we would actually carry out with things like songs and ceremony, feasting, drumming, dancing. And it literally was just beyond the time where it wasn't illegal. So not too long before my birth, it was illegal to do all of that. My parents were adults, and I'm really fortunate to indicate that they decided to persevere through any of those kinds of challenging times to make sure that our language, our songs, our dances, and some of our ceremonies were celebrated in our family. So I recall when I was a little one going to powwows. My community of Okumakong actually in 2020 would have been celebrating their 60th annual cultural celebration. One of the longest running powwows here in our region, also one of the largest powwows here in our region. People come from all over the world to see, witness, experience, feel, think, and hear the beautiful Anishinaabe culture through song and dance, also through food, arts, and crafts. But when I think about, the first time I remember going to Wiki Powwow, I was just little. I look at pictures. I was less than a year old in my first picture with my parents at our cultural celebration. And so coming from a community that has very strong cultural ties, very strong and living ways of knowing and doing, Anishinaabe Adzwin, as we call it, is something that I'm pretty honored to indicate that I come from. So I'm thankful that my mom and dad did what they did to help us understand and know how sacred we were as children. When we look at that traditional role of Anishinaabe people, the role of children, Benoji Suk, when you look at the translation of that word, talking about that little uplifted spirit and how unconditional love happens when that baby comes to that family. One of the beliefs that we have is that our children choose the families that they're going to be born into. And so really right around that whole traditional life cycle, lots of teachings around the importance of children, around the unconditional love that's going to happen, around the celebration of life that will happen, and how do you take care of yourself as a mom-to-be in anticipation of that time. So in our family, welcoming children was one of the rites of passages, that traditions that we brought to life, that we celebrated in life. And what we would do is, as a family, we would gather to welcome that newborn. Usually both maternal grandparents, grandmothers in particular, would sit at the feet of that baby, and they would use cedar water, and they would take a cedar bough and they would wash that baby's feet, indicating the journey from the spirit world to this present world, and that it was a long journey. And so the symbolic washing of the feet with cedar water would indicate that they're being welcomed by their grandmothers for the journey that lies ahead of them in this family that they've been born into, chose and born into. Really a beautiful way to say the blessing of the first cry of that baby in that family. And then you have the mom and dad sitting around that baby, and then the aunties and uncles sitting around that baby. And what they do is everybody makes a commitment to how they're going to help nourish, nurture, celebrate, love, and care for that little one. And that would continue all the way on through to puberty rites celebration. Sometimes after a welcoming ceremony, we might see a naming ceremony. And in that naming ceremony, you might have guardians or sponsors, kind of like aunties and uncles, chosen by the parents, by the grandparents maybe. Who and how is this person or these people that you choose going to influence, affect, love, nourish, nurture that child? And so I remember in my family experience, I had 4 aunties, 4 sponsors that were female, and then 4 uncles, 4 sponsors that were male. And that both of those energies would bring gifts to my life. They would share and talk about what it meant to be a healthy, contributing woman to society, to my community, to my family. And they would nurture that. So maybe some aunties knew how to sew, maybe some aunties were really good at cooking, and what they would do is transfer those skills to me. My uncles, good at harvesting, learning how to fish, learning how to skin a fish, learning how to fillet it, learning, what do I do? Not a huge fan of guns, but what do I do if I need to shoot one? So I welcomed those kinds of things from the different people in my life, male and female, that I saw as aunties and uncles in the celebration of my name, which is Nanoshkas, hummingbird. And I got my name at puberty, actually. We have a couple of different ceremonies that happen for our young men and our young women. Our young women at puberty, sometimes they go through ceremonies, rituals that are called berry fasting. Both of my daughters went through a berry fast. It's actually a year-long process, beautiful process. It involves aunties, it involves supporting these young women, young girls who are going to very soon become young women through their very first cycle. The ability to give life, the ability to bear life is such a beautiful gift from creation. And so in that year-long ceremony, that rites of passage, the berry fast, what we're doing is we're teaching those young girls about the role of becoming a woman and how sacred that role is, using things like discipline, in berry fasting, that's exactly what you're doing. You're fasting for a year. You're giving up berries and anything berries. When I remember my daughters going through that time, um, they were in grade 6. They decided, in their young wisdom, to share that experience with their teacher and their classmates. And I remember Mr. Magley, my daughter's grade 6 teacher, actually calling me and saying, "Is this okay? If Cassidy wants to do this, I would love to see this happen in our class." Because, of course, the grade 6 curriculum, you learn about Anishinaabe people. And so Cassidy celebrated that rites of passage with her classmates. And it was at the end of the year, at the end of that year term, we would actually go and finish that celebration by breaking her fast. Cassidy had her classmates help her with the discipline of no berries throughout the whole school year. No berry juice. Hey, Cass, what's in there? Make sure there's no berries in there. Chapstick, no berry chapstick. Gum, candy, anything like that. Her classmates were very generous in helping. And I really, as a family, I really believe that it helped us teach her classmates, her fellow citizens, her fellow community members in the time to come a better way to understand some of our traditions as Anishinaabe people. And at the end of that year-long berry fast, then we have this awesome community celebration. And all the way throughout that year, she'll have community members, usually her aunties and uncles and people that are very near and dear to our family, offer that support, offer words of wisdom, offer advice, offer skills development, in celebration of those skills and development of those skills. Sewing, for example, beading. Cassidy is an avid, beautiful, skilled beater now, and she's in her mid-20s. I thank those women and those men that taught her all those things in that year that she was in that berry fast. At the end of the berry fast, we had a community celebration. So her grandparents came, her aunties, her uncles, her cousins. And at our annual cultural gathering, we actually also shared a feast in terms of the rest of the powwow community that was there. Probably close to 2,000 visitors. And we held an honor song so that Cassidy could be acknowledged as a young woman in front of our community, in front of that powwow circle that she had been dancing in since she could walk. She was just little. And shared strawberries with all of those people, well, around the circle. I mean, not everybody got a strawberry, but doing what you can. Really it's about the intentions of how you make and bring these beautiful pieces of who we are to life in this contemporary time. A long time ago, things would have been differently, possibly in terms of the giveaway. You might have had family members contribute, different animal pelts or different other things, other commodities that they may have had. Here in our area, porcupine quills. Out west, if you think about out west and the kind of animals that are out there, elk teeth. You might have found different parts of different animals that might be useful depending on where you were right across the land. But here in our area, porcupine quills might have been one of those things that would have been put on the blanket and added to the gifts that would be distributed out to the community in celebration and acknowledgement of this young woman who is now in her teenage years. And so that rites of passage for our girls is something that I've witnessed my own daughters going through, my nieces going through. For our young men, usually a male would share these teachings, but I'm also a mom of 2 boys, and my 2 sons have had the opportunity to go through their puberty rites celebration. There's a number of different ways that we celebrate young manhood. Taking a young man out to go hunting and his first kill might acknowledge that time in that family's life. You might have a young man who has decided to fast for the very first time and is out on a fasting experience, and he'll do that in his move into young manhood. In my family, we had names that were re-honored, I guess you could say, because both my sons got their names at birth. And so in their puberty rites celebration, we decided that it would be a good idea to re-honor those names that were given to them, to bring out those uncles again to come and help remind them of their important role as men in the community, to be protectors, providers, hunters, gatherers, and what kinds of skills are involved in doing that. And at the same time, as a mom, as the woman and as sisters in the family, teaching them about their heart side, that it's okay to have emotions, that it's okay to express emotions, it's okay to celebrate those gifts that creation has given. And so moving to adulthood, I think about rites of passage into adulthood. The most important rites of passage that I can think of that I know happens would be the very first time you become a parent. And sometimes that's younger, sometimes that's older. But most oftentimes that would be the rites of passage in our traditional family life cycle that moves us into adulthood. And sometimes people choose not to have children. Sometimes people are not able to have children. But what is so important and beautiful from my perspective in our culture is the role of an auntie and the role of an uncle, and how important those roles are. So if you can't be a mom, either by choice or because of circumstance, or you can't be a dad because of choice or circumstance, you can definitely be a big brother, an uncle, somebody, bigger cousin, somebody in that adult world who teaches about the roles and responsibilities of being from the adult community. That we take care of our young people, we take care of our children, we take care of our grandmas and grandpas, and that we need to be brave. Sometimes we're doing things for the very first time that nobody knows the answer to, and we have to be brave in facing those challenges. Those are the kinds of roles that we play as aunties and uncles, big brothers, big sisters, big cousins. And I've had those kind of people in my life as well, and I'm really thankful for them. They never had children of their own, but they always offered some perspective or some influence of some kind, most oftentimes very positive based. And, of course, one of the things, and this is my perspective that I share with you, one of the things that sometimes happens is people, they have more challenge, it seems, in their life. But boy, oh boy, are they ever good at getting through to the other side. And to me, that natural gift is called resilience. And in today's world, we really need to celebrate the resilience of people. Really, in 2020, we're going through this world pandemic. And if it wasn't for the people who showed me about resilience, I might be struggling with how to find that resilience in me and how do I model it to my children. So those kinds of negative things that happen in life, I do believe they serve a purpose. Most oftentimes they're not welcomed at the moment. And usually it's hindsight where we find the lesson or the gift in that experience. And then the beautiful next step, when we look at that traditional family life cycle of moving into grandparenthood, elderhood, being an elder in the community. The first step most oftentimes is marked by becoming a grandparent for the first time. You yourself have raised children. You yourself have impacted children, either as an auntie or an uncle or a big sister, big brother. And so have lived through many different experiences that have allowed you to become, fairly knowledgeable in how to handle things. Maybe you have the stories of generations in the past, and it's now your responsibility to pass those along. Maybe you have a little bit more time because something like retirement has found its way to you. And so you're doing things like sharing teachings. You're doing things like telling stories. You're making sure that things from the past are not forgotten. And so the grandmas and grandpas in our family life cycle have a very particular role to play with the children of that generation. There's a very special connection between grandmas and grandpas and the children in the family. And again, it may not be blood relatives. There are many times where we have had to, because of past traumas in our in our world, in terms of being Anishinaabe, First Nation, Métis, or Inuit, the 60s scoop, residential school, the world wars, the different illness pandemics that have happened. There's a number of different reasons why you might not have your actual blood family close to you. And so as a result of a number of different circumstances, you may have to have what we call a family of choice. And in that family of choice, you naturally adopt, little ones or younger ones to come and teach them stories about things that happened in the past. And it might, actually be in a very nonchalant kind of way. It might be while you're busy skinning a fish, or maybe you're making some bannock, or maybe you're cooking some cookies, and you're talking about things. When we look at the role of those grandmas and grandpas in our lives, those are some of the things that I've been taught about how they help to nurture and nourish a traditional family life. And when I say the word traditional, I don't mean, that I'm wearing my traditional Ojibwe style dress, my hair's in braids, and I've got feathers on. I'm talking about some of the more traditional kinds of experiences that have come down through the generations. And yeah, in today's world, to be Anishinaabe, if I was going to dance at a powwow, I would put those kinds of things together as a traditional dress outfit. And I would feast them, and I would celebrate them, and I would wear them, and I would dance. But in our contemporary world, in our everyday life, traditional family life cycle, this really, in my eyes, is talking about things from the past and making sure that those stories and that knowledge is coming down through the generations. Those practices that celebrate life, that allow people to feel like they belong, to feel that love, to feel nurtured and cared for by a sense of community. In our Western way of thinking, a family is usually signified by what we would call a nuclear family, a mom, a dad, and the kids. In our Anishinaabe thinking, our people are very systemic people. We have, in a home, maybe a mom, a dad, a grandma, an auntie, a cousin, and the kids. In my home, it's always been that way. And so it's been a sense of community for a very long time for me. I am very thankful that my friends at Ermatinger Old Stone House National Historic Site decided to ask me to come and share these teachings with you. And I remind you, these are the teachings that come from me and my family. And I freely share them with you as a story so that you have a little bit more knowledge about who I might be should you know me or see me. Or maybe your neighbor down the street who happens to be Anishinaabe, First Nation, Métis, or Inuit. And very thankful that you took the time to listen and learn just a tiny bit about our beautiful ways of knowing and doing. Chimigwech, Kanoaya.